All right, who's first? Fresh out the Black Panther film. Dr. Burroughs in the building. Hating in the dark in the back. Who's first?
Dr. Burroughs.
Well, look.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Dr. Burroughs.
You got Black Panther on your birthday.
Black Panther on your birthday.
And it's my birthday for another hour, so thank you. Okay, look, I gotta be honest. I loved this movie, but
what'd you love about it first?
I loved that black people were powerful and strong and beautiful, and that so much of the comics was used. But
of all the different forms of the comics.
Right. But
people should go hear our podcast at ourmixwithoutlike.org for that full conversation.
Yes.
But go ahead.
But it's very clear to me why Ava DuVernay was not allowed to do this movie. And it was very clear to me that Marvel clearly told Coogler how the movie was going to end. So he said, you can do whatever you want to do, but the movie politically is going to end here.
So, but wait a minute. Because I've hated on Ava as not being forward politically enough to do these things. So why do you think that she would have done it better?
Ava was going to let her black LA film school, black filmmaker come out. She wanted it. She talked about it.
So that instinct that she suppressed when she did the 13th?
Or when she refused to include Stokely Carmichael and Selma.
She was going to let it out for this.
I think she was going to let it out. I think she was going to let her inner Julie Dash out. And she outlined to Marvel what she wanted. You can read this online. She outlined to Marvel what she wanted to do, and Marvel said, no, we don't want that.
I mean, because Julie Dash would make the white man the rapist.
Wow.
Yes.
As opposed to the hero.
He
saves Wakanda.
Now, let's just be clear, right?
Okay, go ahead.
If you want to see the white man saving the black woman that he was really going to rape, you could have just watched Crash.
Oh, man.
No.
Or got the alternate ending to Monster. Not Monster. What was
Monster's Ball?
The director's cut.
No.
But you know, same way we said in the conversation, Dr. Burroughs,
right?
This was not Reginald Hudlin's Panther.
The James Bond elements were his Panther, but no, he was not the Panther of that first story. I agree.
So let's deal with that for a second, right? Let me just see some elements here. Now, one of the things I did like was that to burn the ancestral memory, you had to destroy the keepers of the memory. And the keepers weren't just the people, the keepers were the plants.
The environment itself, right? Mm-hmm.
So I felt real Stevie Wonder up in there. Like the Wakandans know the secret life for plants.
Secret life for plants is dope.
Wow.
So it could have been, as Ahati Kalindi E would talk about, the mushroom kingdom as the oldest species on the earth, knowing everybody's story. And that sacred flower that they used would have been like the blue lotus in ancient Kemet, the Nelam Yore, which means one mind, one heart, amongst the folks out of Gabon, the Bwiti religion. I mean, these cultures actually exist. So you could see them play themselves out. So I wasn't mad at that, right? Even the ritual death as initiation, you could see that in a lot of rites of passages.
Or Avatar, which is my concern. Well, and I don't want to cut you off, but just but I do, as a bridge of your thought, so to speak, for your that's what I was whispering to you in the thing. Like, if this is all wonderful, if you have an understanding of the context and the African cultural context, but for most of the folks going to see this film who don't have that, then it just, to me, looks like Avatar again, or any number of other pop Disney-like films where somebody goes through some sort of spiritual transition. For some reason, Avatar is the only one that's coming to my mind right now. But
the other movie was
yeah.
Christianity, where Jesus rises from the dead.
Oh, man.
But in this joint,
The longest
it took about
running
3
film.
minutes for him to get back up.
Right. Okay.
What did you think of the ancestral plane and the conversations there? And
I thought it was interesting, but I thought it was more beautifully done in Bezuro. That the ritual process of initiating Bezuro into Candomblé was more beautiful when the Orishas visit him and heal him in the water. This one, not that it has to be done in the water, right? But this one just didn't seem like enough. Like you got to visit one direct ancestor. You got to see the other ancestors. Now, here was the issue with that, okay? Amongst the Maasai, in rites of passage, the young boys who are becoming men gotta go hunt the most rambunctious young lion in a pride and snatch the tooth of that joint with spears. So in this one, you see the panther necklace, but you don't see the relationship of how them teeth came up on that necklace. So did they snatch the teeth out that panthers? I wanted to see more about that. But that's not the movie they were making.
I want you, Dr. Burroughs, to recount one of the pieces you talked about tonight after the film. When I offered my summary, baseline, constant, repetitive critique that this is commercial product created by Disney, promoted by Disney, to disassociate us from our radical Black Panther and other symbolisms and Africanisms. And one of the audience participants raised, not just in response to what I said, but just in general, the positive nature of all of this and the positive aspect. You told a story about Paul Robeson. I would like for you to repeat that now, if you wouldn't mind, please.
Paul Robeson made, I think, 3 Hollywood movies before he retired from that because he was very disappointed with his white liberal allies because they told him that he was going to make a certain kind of movie, and they made 3 movies and he realized he had been duped.
And specifically this relates because, as the audience participant pointed out, if I remember correctly, her point was, it's great that we get to see Africa depicted positively, and this will have a reverberating positive effect on our youth going forward. And
I'm sure this is what Paul Robeson thought when he and Nina McKinney signed on to do a movie called Sanders of the River. Sanders of the River is about a powerful African leader of his own country, played by Paul Robeson, and it's a great film. I mean, all sorts of fun, exciting things happen in this movie, but there's a couple of scenes in this movie where Paul Robeson is interacting with the white colonial administrator. And what the movie does, it reinforces white colonial rule of Africa and says that everything is great to do that. So watching Black Panther the second time, even though, like I said, I like the Ross character, he's very funny in the comics, and he serves as kind of a foil to Panther in the comics. Watching it the second time, I kind of felt like, okay, this might be the most sophisticated version of Sanders in the River that you could have, if not literally, maybe symbolically, because this movie's sequel is out in 3 months, Avengers Infinity War, which will have Black Panther in it and Wakanda, and now the Avengers movies will have this whole new audience, this audience of us. So this is Disney's idea of taking control over the entire world's imagination. They just don't want Americans anymore. They want everybody. And this was a way to make sure that Africa and African people would be on board for Disney's construction of the imagination.
Now, you know what the funny thing is? When Disney did Moana, they actually seemed to hold more continuity with how they depicted a Pacific Island nation with their deities than what you see here. So it's kind of like Disney's not a friend of Africa. And I don't know why we would expect it with Walt Disney being the Nazi that he is.
So, right, well, yeah, damn, I didn't even think about the Moana thing. I mean, well, so my thing, I just want to get this part out. So my thing very quickly is Kilmonger is the hero. And what's his African name again?
N'Jaka.
N'Jaka is the real hero of the film because he's the only one that kills an Afrikaner, and he's the only one that says all this technology and weaponry needs to be used to save the 2 billion of our people that are over-policed, surveilled, mass incarcerated, and held in poverty.
I agree. They should have compromised with him, and we would have had a different movie. The movie should have ended with the African Union, and them talking, and then all of them talking to the African Union. I agree.
But they kill him, and then the other point that what is it? The mid-credit scene at the end.
Yes.
That is really the one for me that I think is the icing on my political and analytical cake.
It spoiled the movie for me, that mid-credit scene.
Because when you have, because to me, that is all I did see when I saw that scene is Patrice Lumumba addressing the United Nations. And what was that, 63, 62, 60? Somewhere around there, when he led the revolution, 60, when he led the revolutionary movement in the Congo. And it was that speech to the UN where he told them, we're going to use Africa's resources for Africans. We're going to overturn this relationship we have with our colonizers. It was at that meeting that the white folks sat there and were offended, and they were furious, and they plotted his assassination. And in this film, it's the CIA guy smiling and nodding at him as the Black Panther turns over Wakanda's technology to them.
Right.
Not to help African people, but to help the CIA, the West, and this Avengers crew, which is all fighting for the Western U.S. state.
Right.
I was like, man, that
right. And that mid-credit sequence really hurt me because of that. That's exactly right.
Now, the brother was wearing a Kyrie Jones, who's an African designer sitting up in Philly and creates some marvelous stuff.
Okay.
But not for Marvel.
Not for Look, man, I don't want to deny any of that. I'm as caught up as I think anybody in the aesthetics. I love seeing a film. Look, I'm a big fan of, again, to contradict myself politically, I'm a big fan of Netflix's Marco Polo series, primarily because there are almost no white people in it, despite the name, and you see Asian and other world people acting in their own, more or less, relatively speaking, context. And that's nice. I like that. So I like seeing African people looking good, winning. What I would like to see more is that relationship to the material lived experience of African people here. So all the stuff that the other people have pointed out, there's 16 Black Panther Party members still locked up, political prisoners or in exile.
The Guardian wrote an article about that.
A number of people have pointed that out. But I don't see that being pointed out enough in our spaces where so many of our folks are excited. And I think that's the other thing I wanted you to bring up for the other point that I actually wanted you to do it tonight, but maybe to quickly reiterate what you said in our podcast. I think you said in our podcast that there is another historical moment similar to this, a couple of them in recent history, in our lifetimes at least.
Oh, you mean Roots?
Well, I was going to start with Obama, the phenomenon of Obama, but then take it back to Roots, which I think are very similar.
But you know what's interesting to me about this? The fact that it happened post-Obama, because I thought we were happy, quote unquote, we're happy with a black president and felt very powerful, et cetera, et cetera. And I keep thinking, like, is this Black Panther thing a reaction to Trump? Or is it a need to see real, strong black leadership? I
think your first point is it. I think the whole... Well, one, I think the marketing community, because again, Obama won Brand of the Year in 2008 from the marketing community. The marketing community saw very well what can happen globally when you properly promote an African functioning on your behalf. So the whole world fell in love with Obama. I think that part of that is, everything, one of the points that didn't get fleshed out tonight because there wasn't time is that what black people do, the question has never been can what black people do become popular and accepted around the world. That happens all the time. Dr. Haight brought up Christianity, obviously with music. So that's not the issue for me. The issue is, what does that do materially for those people? Obviously nothing, except it's become an extractive resource like any other thing. So, anyway, that's why I just keep coming back to that whole thing. And as this is happening, and again, I give him credit for this. Antonio Moore made the point about the Lowndes County symbolism and the treatment of the people down there to this day living in so-called third world conditions. Nobody cares. Black Panther Party, assaulted, disbanded, imprisoned. There's no movement around that. No movement.
And we celebrate Black History Month with toys.
So and I think what was said tonight at the panel by somebody out there, that there's no, and maybe Dr. Haight, you can elaborate on this point real quick, that there's no political responsibility attached to seeing this film.
So let me go back to a point that I was just making, right? Mm-hmm. So when you were talking about Lumumba addressing the UN, and I was saying T'Challa goes to the UN in some fly African clothing by Kire Jones. You saw the same thing with Nkrumah.
Right.
When he addresses the UN, he comes full kente cloth out. And the weaver for kente, the kente weaver at the time for Nkrumah, has a son who was asked to recreate the kente cloth for the 50th anniversary of the independence of Ghana and give it to the UN. So he does the same thing in the tradition of his father, recreates that cloth, and then builds on it. Baba's name is Kwesi Asare, right? And he's here between Ghana and DC. So, to answer your point then, what is the political responsibility coming out this movie? Well, that's very clear. It's one, to save white CIA people. Two, to kill the African American who was an enemy and an outsider despite being blood related to Wakanda.
That was deep.
The evil black American.
Right?
That was deep. I definitely, we got to say something about that.
The evil black American.
That person,
that's been written about online, by the way.
Would
that
be
dynamic
the Frantz Fanon character who would understand the West from a position of being in the West and oppressed by the West. Because like Kilmonger, Fanon served for the French and thought he was doing his duty going to fight the Germans.
That's right.
And when he watches what happens to the Africans from Senegal, Fanon then says, I want to petition to complete my medical training and go serve in a hospital inside Senegal.
But it looks like to me
to work with the great scientist Cheikh Anta Diop.
Wow, right.
But it looks like to me they neutralized Kilmonger's political philosophy by trying to make him into a dictator. When they had Kilmonger say the sun will never set on Wakanda, that's European imperialism. Yeah. That's why.
That's what I'm saying.
That's why I say Pan-Africanism is not reverse imperialism.
Right. That was a beautiful line tonight. But see, part of the point was I took. Go ahead.
Can we go in on that?
Yeah, no, please do.
But
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Because the ones who gave that line, "The sun will never set on the British Empire," are the same ones who literally give the name Nigeria.
That's right.
Because of the Niger River.
That's right.
So it's General Lugard.
That's right.
And then his wife, who's the statistician and bean counter, that's counting all of the territories that produce good food and crops for the British Empire in the Northern Hemisphere.
That's right.
When it's summer.
That's right.
And then when it's winter, they can go to the Southern Hemisphere and get those good tropical climate crops.
Right.
So that either winter or summer doesn't really have an effect on the sun for the British Empire because it never sets, right? So his idea then is to become the new Britain, the UK, for the African world. Now, that would be a novel idea because the Brits obviously get their power through propaganda and their naval empire. Right? But they also get it by stopping the trade of all other groups that are working in the mercantilist industries. And what would be most fascinating in the discussion of Wakanda would be their blue dyes that give them the indigo that they use in their clothing. Same thing Britain was doing. So that cotton industry that develops as the plantations and colonies are happening inside of Africa. Let's be clear on that. The colonies inside of Africa still producing cotton. Zimbabwe cotton is supposed to be the best, taken by the Japanese and the English for their denim, right? That's traded all over the world. But can Zimbabwe make the money off that? No. So the UK is banning the trade of the strongest indigo so that it can then control the indigo inside other colonies and say that we have the best indigo, which is all they want to do with the vibranium, which is why they steal the vibranium, which is why they steal the coltan out of the Congo, right? So now, Fanon would see all of this and then say, it's our responsibility to prevent anyone from encroaching on African soil and to defeat every colonizer everywhere they are on the continent. And then Nkrumah would say, cool, we're going to develop a federated states of Africa from west to east with no divisions, because if there's one African country that's going to be penetrated, then all of Africa is going to be penetrated.
No, but see, for me, this was it. This is the film being promoted to the world as a very Pan-African, all black world film that features a nation and a people that are decidedly anti-Pan-African.
Right.
And who have said, as we pointed out earlier, we will not use our so where Nkrumah was saying we're gonna, and did, not just saying, turning Ghana into a training ground for revolutionaries fighting in South Africa and Southern Africa, not just in the country itself, all throughout Southern Africa, and saying we're gonna teach Africans throughout the continent how to engage in guerrilla warfare and fight their colonizers. We're gonna support them. The real Pan-African movement that is crushed by the CIA is rebirthed in this film, led by the CIA in decidedly the opposite fashion, where the technology and the strength and power of the first and most advanced sovereign African nation will be used for the West.
And can we go further right there on that point?
I hope so.
Because the CIA agent who is intelligence for Wakanda is intelligence to tell who Kilmonger is.
Right.
Njaka, right? The same way the CIA agent in the US goes to Russia to get Fanon, to treat him for leukemia, bring him back to the US to make sure he dies under the medical protection of the National Institutes of Health.
Wow.
So the CIA agent was there to make sure they kill Kilmonger. Because he would use the vibranium as a political weapon.
For the 2 billion people, he said, that look like us all over the world, that are mass surveilled, incarcerated, So this was, this was going back to my whole thing.
Oh, and I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Ali Iceland is the CIA agent who died at the ripe old age of 93 in 2017, right out here
5 minutes ago,
in Maryland.
Wow.
So this is why when Fruitvale Station came out,
Noble Savage.
Again, my argument was the same then. It is not that Coogler and them are bad people. It is that the industry will not allow them to do anything other than what they are here doing. So, as we saw what we might think are attempts in this film, for instance, to throw advanced thought. The sister making the point about the wig.
The Boko Haram.
The Boko Haram. I have that note. The Boko
Haram.
But see, that's the opposite for me, though. That was again reminding you that this is going to be a decidedly Western tale, because they just took the same old standard Boko Haram and those evil Muslims in Africa who are stealing girls without the broader context being described. That fits the Western theme of this is what Africa is like. It's a wasteland of savages who steal girls and who are led, of course, by Muslim terrorists, which is why the brother that is the uncle that's killed, that is Kilmonger's father, is described as having become radicalized by his experience in America. That again, the same coded language that is used to talk about the radicalized Muslims that come to this country or from this country but become radicalized by Islam to fight against the West. This is exactly how they describe Kilmonger and his father. They come here, they get radicalized, and then become terrorist, insurgent enemies that have to be killed. When what they're saying is how dare we have all these advantages that we're not using for our people? That to me was oh man, that's where I was like. But anyway, so when you see Fruitvale Station, to me it's the same thing about the humanizing the savage, which in this case is Black Panther and the Wakandans, who are the humanized savages who are going to overcome their conditions, just like we were meant to see of Oscar Grant, only to have their either deaths or salvations brought by the state itself. So as Fruitvale ends, it's the state being let off the hook. It's the revolution being ignored by the film, and it throws in enough scenes to remind you that the police as an institution are not the enemy, and that by that scene, just quickly remembering, by the scene that starts the thing at the end on the train, having it be a raucous event that starts by young Black and brown people, giving legitimacy to the police being on the platform in the first place, blah, 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 blah. See, we have to be there, because if we aren't there, you savages will kill each other and make the streets unsafe, so the police have to be there. And if there's an accidental killing of one of you in the process, that's ultimately your fault. That's what we end up getting in that Fruitvale movie. It's the same kind of thing here. Africans fighting each other, and then it's the Western state and the Western empire that benefits and is let off the hook, having had not one word in the film, I shouldn't say that, not many words in the film pointing to their involvement in creating this situation in the first place. So I mean, anyway,
can I sum that up?
Please go ahead, please, because I was struggling there.
So Coogler has now killed 2 Africans on different train tracks.
Oh.
One was Fruitvale Station.
Oh,
Here we go.
And the other one was Wakanda Station.
Here we go.
Oh wow, that's true. That's true.
We already saw that murder on the tracks.
Oh, wow.
Watch how this works, right?
Wow.
Because I kept thinking, when did we ever get this excited for seeing our culture on screen, where people would bring drums into the theaters and be doing everything they could to show all of their African identity and love for Africa. And I was like, I remember 83, 84, when this movie came out, and people were breakdancing and b-boying in the aisles.
That's true.
And in the front of the theater.
That's true.
That was Beach Street. And it showed the purity of hip-hop culture in the essence of MCing, DJing, b-boying, and graph writing. And the pure graph writer was Remo.
That's right. And what happens to him?
And Remo is out there bombing as he does, and they walk down to the tracks and they hear somebody going over his piece. The purity and beauty of African graffiti in the hands of a Puerto Rican. And when they find him, who is it but Spit, who's tagging up on a perfect piece. And when Remo goes to war and fights Spit, Remo gets shocked on the tracks and dies. And then the end of it is a jambalaya Pan-African music fest with the church and the choir singing and the b-boys b-boying and Melly Mel rapping in a perfectly beautiful Beat Street. And if you want to think that Kendrick Lamar has anything on anybody in any time, go back and listen to the lyrics in Beat Street. And then compare that to everything Kendrick Lamar has done on this track. And you will find out how much of a hoax Kendrick Lamar is as a conscious MC.
Damn! You didn't know we were saving the best hate for the end. I mix what I like, what I like, what I